The South African Weather Service has expressed concerns about the public's response to its warnings, calling for more action to prevent loss of life. Over the weekend, a heavy snowfall caused severe disruptions across KwaZulu-Natal, the Free State, as well as the Eastern Cape. Now, this raises critical questions about the readiness and the effectiveness of disaster management teams. Were they adequately prepared, or did they fall short in responding to these warnings? Well, to help us explore and unpack this further, we're now joined by political analyst Sandile Swana. Mr. Swana, thank you so much for your time. Well, there are certainly a number of takeaways from this particular incident, right? About the response, just levels, during this disaster, from both what the weather services are saying in terms of the public's response to weather warnings, but what about the response from government in the form of disaster management teams or road management authorities? I mean, what do you then make of how we handled this particular, incident over the weekend, as many people are pointing to the inefficiencies?
Thank you so much, Unati, and good day to the listeners. The situation is this. Mid-year this year, the Minister of Local Government, Velenkosi Hlabisa, made it clear that our system of disaster management is not up to standard. We are not relevant to the events that are happening in the country. Now, they are learning from other countries on how to prepare themselves better. The first thing that we need to be aware of is you are talking about the weather services, which is part of the early warning system, as to where that information must go into and who must do what about the information in terms of how cold it's going to be, what volume of snow is expected, and so on and so forth. The Disaster Management Center nationally receives, I think they received about 158 disaster management plans from municipalities, from national departments, Department of Education. And then you would have expected that over the years, people such as Sandile would have had snow plows, suitable equipment to clear the highways, such as the N3, for instance. And we have not seen any evidence of them being adequately prepared to deal with that. The municipalities, so the other thing is about our laws. So you have a state of local classification of disaster. So a disaster, if the municipality gets overwhelmed, if the province gets overwhelmed, then the national kicks in, and so on. So those things need to be classified speedily to be able to mobilize the resources. But let me say this, that to the extent that I've visited, certainly at the municipal level, even in the Maluti area and those types of areas, the disaster management centers, and as far as I'm aware, physically on the ground, are not equipped to deal with the exact disaster, potential disasters that are there. And there is no budget for preventative measures that are taken before the disaster actually happens. Yeah. And lastly, what I will say is that the civil infrastructure to handle stormwater and the town planning and all of that is not up to standard to cope with the weather, the fire, and so on and so forth in South Africa as we speak today.
And I mean, just going back to that point where you are talking about early warning systems from the Weather Service as well, probably also helping here. Other people, of course, saying that, the N3, toll concession would have or should have closed the road sooner to prevent what we have seen. But what do you then make of the call by the KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Transport and Human Settlements, Siboniso Duma, saying that the provincial government intends to invest in rail transport, both freight and passenger? With these disasters happening at the rate in which they're happening, we've talked about the fires 3 weeks ago, and so, I mean, how far will this go?
You will remember that there are nations such as the United States where this snow falls on railways, it falls everywhere. Snow does not choose the mode of transport. So even if you are changing people to railways, even there you need to make sure that the whole system is designed to cope so that it can operate under all weather conditions. The snow that has fallen over the past 58 hours, maybe it's going to 60 now, falls all the time in the US, and they cope with it within hours. So the problem that we're faced with here is that we are not designing our disaster management plans in accordance with the concrete realities that are here in South Africa. We are fantasizing about how we used to live in the 40s, not the concrete realities of the 21st century. We are not ready. We are not relevant to the times. Now, let me make the statement. The statement is that some of these things, such as the snowfall, the rainfall, it's a natural phenomenon. Rain must fall, snow must fall. What makes it a disaster is human behavior. When you do not behave wisely long before the event happens, during the event and after the event, you endanger assets, you endanger lives.
And Mr. Swana, just a final point. I mean, we heard from our reporter about just how businesses are also taking a knock here. We are hearing into the millions in as far as the forestry companies and agricultural companies are concerned, some even considering closing shop. You're now talking about job losses. In as far as that is concerned, where should government play a role? I mean, we also are seeing how over 700 trucks, some of them are only now starting to make, their way and continue on their journey, which also speaks to the ripple effect for some businesses. Yes.
So what we have to admit is that we as national leaders, our parliament, our cabinet, the most senior leaders in the country, what I will say is that we behave as if we are children. Our attitude towards risk is infantile. We keep on hoping for the best and prayers and other things. This is a science. Risk management is a science, and you need to prepare ahead of time. For instance, COVID, there is clear evidence that intelligence services in the country did not actually assess COVID correctly. And when action was taken, it was the wrong action that was taken. So biosecurity of the human population in South Africa is not in place. We still even have cholera. We have unmanaged sewage in South Africa. So there's a lot of areas where risk in South Africa is being unattended to or being attended to in a childish fashion.
Foresight definitely needed here. Mr. Swana, thank you so much for your time and, of course, your reaction on this particular story that is a developing story. Sandile Swana is a political analyst there.